Welcome back. Our Frederick Riddle here, and this is session 4 of the Basic Authors Training Seminar. And today we're going to be looking at editing. And we're going to look at different types of editing. But first of all, I want to remind you of something that I said previously in this seminar. Basically, what I said was this, that I have read many books, some good, some not so good, some actually classics. And I have discovered over a period of time that all books have an error or two. They might be printing errors, they might be the author's errors, there are all types of errors that can be in there. And so I've never come across a book that didn't have an error in it. So if you get the impression that you have to be error-free, that is an incorrect impression. You want to keep it down. Eliminate as many errors as you can. Now, sometimes when people advertise their services as to edit your book for you, they will make statements like, well, that you can't count on yourself, but to edit it to get it error-free. Well, it's not going to be error-free no matter what you do. But that is a legitimate argument. The problem is this. When you're writing a book, you know the flow, you know the characters, you know everything about it, and you know what you wrote. So when you are editing it, your eyes, as it goes, when you're reading through it, your eyes and your brain knows what you think you said, what should have been said. And if you made a mistake in there, there's a good possibility you will overlook it. Somehow the brain fills that word in there, and even though that's not there, you think it is, and you read on and you miss it. And this is common to anybody who writes. So that doesn't mean that you can't do it. It means it's going to be more work for you. I would recommend, if you can get an editor, that is a good way, or at least a legitimate way to go about it. And you want one who's going to be on the same page with you, understand your book a little bit, what you're trying to accomplish and so forth. But you want those fresh eyes. And they're going to see things that you would not necessarily see. Now, that is very correct. That is a good reason right there for getting a professional editor. But most writers are not coming from a position of being able to hire a writer. If you can, that's certainly legitimate to think about it and get somebody like that. They can look at the writing, the formatting, everything. So I'm not knocking them, not in the least. What I am saying is you need to take onto yourself some responsibilities for doing the editing. I don't care if you hire somebody or not. The responsibility ends up yours. When I pick up a book that's written by somebody and it says the author such and such, and I find an error in there, I don't say, oh, the editor made a mistake. No, I think, oh, the author made a mistake. The author's going to get the credit and the author's going to get the criticism. So take responsibility and do your editing, your personal editing of the book. And then if you want to submit it to others, there's different ways you can do that. We will look into that a little bit today. So let's get started. So remember, the idea here is to limit errors. And there are many procedures. I'm going to look at some of them here. I'm going to use terms you may never have heard before. Some of them are basically my own term. And this first one is my own term. And I call this rough editing. Rough editing to me is that as you are writing a book, you stop, you see a mistake, you stop and correct it. And then you write some more and then you stop and correct it. You write some more and you stop and correct it. That's called rough editing, or at least I call it that. And that is something I would advise you keep a lid on. Don't stop it. It's okay to do that to an extent. But if you spend every other minute correcting your work, it's going to take a long, long time to write that book. I would say that the focus should be on your writing at this point in time. If you see an obvious mistake and you know the answer, go ahead, correct it. But if it's a mistake that you think, or you don't know the answer to it, I would suggest you write it down somewhere, where it's located and what the mistake is, and move on and come back later to make the corrections. The reason I'm saying this is that whenever you edit, you are interrupting the flow of your story. So you're writing around, all of a sudden you see something, you stop. You stop right where you're at and you go back and correct. You stopped your flow. You've interrupted your flow. And getting back and picking that up and to continue it where you left it can be difficult at times, depending upon where you are in the story. So that is one of the reasons why I say keep a lid on it. I'm not saying not do it. I'm saying keep a lid on it so it's under control. This is not rough editing is not going to make your book the bestseller or whatever. It's a help. It is, and I do it. I'll admit to that. I do that, but I try to keep a lid on it. Again, I try to focus. If I'm going to do any editing at all at this stage, it's the obvious things. I use WordPerfect. I haven't used WordPerfect in years. I use Microsoft Word, and what it is, it will underline or highlight in some way a word that I make, and if I spot that, sometimes I'll look it up. And sometimes it's a suggestion that the program, I've mentioned this before, doesn't really understand where you're going or anything. It just understands rules of grammar. And so it might highlight it and say, you might want to look at this a little closer, you might want to change this, whatever. I would not worry about that unless it's an obvious change that you think you should need to do right now. So rough editing should always be kept under control and limited, because you want your flow. At this point in time, your emphasis is on the story creation itself. So, but there is that. Then there's revising. Now you can revise a scene, a chapter, or the entire book. When I talk about revising, I'm thinking more of on a chapter level. Sometimes when you're doing a scene, it doesn't fit, and you will say, okay, I need to revise this. That should not be something you're doing all the time. Hopefully, as you write your stories and so forth, it will fit. It can also mean moving that scene from one place to another place, and the book, of course, definitely gets into that one. But revising involves renewing. I'm going to write that down. Reviewing, or we'll just say review, and edit. And this is a thing that you need to do. Pause your writing, and I say chapter level because that's a good place, but you might have a space right in your chapter too, where you're pausing, maybe changing to a different character, a different scene going on elsewhere in your book, or in the story that you're writing. And so you might say, okay, that's a good place to stop. And it is, because you have actually stop the flow of that particular scene, that particular storyline, and you're about to go in a different direction for a little while. So that might be a natural place for you to stop, and now you go back and review from the beginning what you have written. So you want to review your writing, and then do some editing. Some of it will be obvious, some of it will be spelling, some of it will be just strictly grammar, and you have that grammar tool available to you. Just remember, the grammar tool suggests. It might come out. Well, this is wrong, but treat it as a suggestion, because it does not know where you are going and what you are doing. Even though we're dealing with artificial intelligence here, AI, it still doesn't know where you're going unless you've actually told it that where you're going. So you want to be in charge. Always you want to be in charge. Listen to what your AI or whatever it is you're using tells you. But you take a look and you review the work and see if the suggestions they're making will work. Now, if they are correct that you're using the wrong grammar or something, you might want to revise that scene, that sentence, whatever it happens to be, even the entire chapter, for that matter. Revising is a very important part of your writing experience. So at least I would suggest that each chapter you do it at least that one time. And if you can have other times, that's fine. You're getting into this point now, you're taking charge of it, you're editing it, you might actually, like I said, you might actually move it from one place to another. I've done that many a time, and that requires some effort on your part. You gotta watch for leaving bits and pieces of your storyline back where you had it, and it didn't move when you moved the scene, and you left that back there. You want to clean that up. So revising is very, very important. Now we get into what I call basic. Now everybody has their own idea of what basic editing is. So I'm going to tell you, this again is a chapter by chapter. Basic editing can also be not only chapter by chapter, but can be the end of the book. It can be the entire book. And it's a mixture. I do chapter by chapter. Let's write that down. Chapter by chapter. I also do the end of the book, how it ends. But that's also the time when I do it. So, end of book. And when I do the end of the book, that's when I'm going to do the entire book at the same time. Or you can do the end of the book and then like your last few chapters and so forth, and then go and do the entire book. So basic editing is in depth. As opposed to up here. Here you did light and medium heavy, maybe even heavy, depending upon the situation. But when you get down to here, to the basic editing, and you're doing an entire book especially, you want it to be in depth. And that requires a bit of energy on your level. You may want to have a grammar book by you. In fact, I would even advise having some aids available when you're doing the revising up here. But when you get into basic editing, you're into the serious business of editing your work. Whether it's, you might say, well, I don't want to do chapter by chapter. I think you're making a mistake, but that's your book, and you can have that You can do that if you want to, but I would advise you do a chapter or chapter. At the end of the book, do the end. And when I talk about the end of the book, I'm not talking about the back matter or anything. I'm talking about your story. And I'm talking about the closing parts of your story. You want that to be satisfactory to the reader. You close that story up, like that story I was telling you before about. I believe I told you in the last session, was that I read a book in which did not end up the way I wanted it to, but the author did a pretty good job of bringing it all together. That while I was disappointed in the ending, I understood it and I accepted it, and so my verdict on that book was still high. But I like happy endings, and that one was not a happy ending. So the thing is that you want to do bring your closing portion of your book, wrap everything up, bring all the things that you may have dropped some clues, depending upon what kind of book you're writing. Clues. You might have some crumbs and so forth, and you want to bring that all together so that it has a good solid ending. Whether it's a happy ending or a sad ending or whatever kind of ending it is, you want the reader to sit back and say, that was a good read. And when you get them to do that, you've got yourself a fan. So, but at that same time that you're doing that, once you have done that, then you want to go back and start at word 1 and do the entire book. Read it through. And at this point in time, what I would talk about is make notes. In other words, there are different ways of doing this. You could make your corrections as you go. That's one way of doing it, and I have done that. Another way is to make notes, which I think is a better way, because you might have a lot of errors. So when you want to make notes, write them down. Now, I used to, when my wife was alive, we would edit one another's books. And so she would give me her book, and I'd go to it, and I'd write notes down. And then I would go, all the material she'd give me, I would take and review it, make my notes as to what I found was wrong or I thought might be wrong, and I would then pass that back to her. And then she would take those sets of notes, and using that, she'll go in and edit it. Or rather, not edit, well, it's part of the editing, but she'd go in and correct it. Well, she did the same thing for me on my books. She would go through, she would ID different areas that needed the correction, which means you give the author, when you're doing that, you're giving the other person, you're giving them the not necessarily in this order, but you're giving them the page. If you're paging it at this point, you want the page number, the paragraph. Is it the top paragraph, the second paragraph, third, fourth, fifth, whatever paragraph it is? And you might even give the first few words of the paragraph so that it makes it easier to identify. And then what the error is, or you think it is, or if you have a question about it. And then you give that all back. And then that gives the author the opportunity to go in, find them, decide what the problem was, and fix it. And it works really pretty good. And by the way, you're getting another set of eyes when you can do that. So notes are, and then you can also, like I said, you could also, I'm going to put it up here. Correct. So you can correct on the spot. On the spot, we'll put that. So you see it. You write notes to yourself, or you can have somebody else write notes to you on it. And then if you're doing it this way, then you do the correction. and it goes back and forth like that. And you go. It takes time. It takes effort, but it's well worth it. You're going to clean up a whole lot of errors, some that you would never have thought of. I was writing a book one time about there was a particular scene, and the person who reviewed my book for me said, "Wait a minute, this here, well, we'll suggest this, this, and this. Is that what you want to do?" And I thought, "Well, no, don't want to do that at all." So I had to go in and make a change. So they'll see things that you won't necessarily see. And so it's always a good idea to have what I believe some people call it a beta author, a beta editor. And so somebody who you trust, they do not have to be an academic, an English academic. In fact, in most places, I would not recommend that. But if you do use one, know that you're going to get a very grammar related review. And so you have to, again, just like you do with a program, you'll have to see, does that fit? But really that's true of anybody you ask to edit your book for you or review your book for you, is to, you have to take their corrections, their suggestions, their little notes and so forth, and say, how does this impact the story? Do I want to follow up and go take the suggested route that they're giving me? Or is there something else I should do? Again, you're in control, but you're using other resources to help you to make a cleaner book, a more readable book, everything. This is an in-depth review and edit. And when you get it all done, you're still not done. Because after all this is done, and you say, "Oh wow, I'm ready to go now. I'm ready to get published." No, you're not. You got one more to do. At least one more. And that is called proof or proofing. Proofing is all this again. Doing the basic all over again. And again, you can use outside sources, but particularly you're interested in getting it proof ready, print ready, publish ready. And so you are published. And so in this case, if you have a publisher, you will want to work with the publisher on that. Publishers generally have their own criteria and stuff and such as that. Now, if you're working with me as your publisher, you and I already know, we've already been working together. So it's basically, but it's more, we are on page together, on course. We're in tandem. We're yoked together, as you might say. And so we're both going for the same goal. We know what the criteria is, and we have some more interchange here, maybe a little bit more than in the basic. But you want to proof it and get it ready to be published. Once you do all that, then comes you get it all published, ready to go. Then comes the printing. Now, depending upon who you use for printing, there may be changes because there has to fit into the dimensions of the book. It has to all the formatting. But see, that's what's something that you and your editor, such as myself, would have been working on all the way through. So that should not be a major problem. In fact, the way I do my books and the way I would be doing your books is that we would be actually involving the printer in the whole process so that we can see it as it develops, as it grows. And so this is almost a some would say probably a throwaway. You don't really need it. But in the end, you do. Because in the end, the printer has to say, okay, it's ready to go. Do you approve? The program I use always gives me the final say as to whether I'm ready to hit that button, say publish. When I hit the word published, put that down, then it will go through the printer's examination. And if there's a problem, it will come back and let you know, and then you just go in and fix it until you get it right, and then it will be able to be published. A lot of times this has to do with the publisher itself, or the printer itself, the printing platform. And again, in the course, we already know what those standards are. We already know what they expect, and we test and have gone through this whole process to make sure that when we get to this point, everything flows. Now, sometimes it don't, and so you have to go back and say, okay, what is it that went wrong? And usually, if there's an error or something like that the printer finds, that printer will let you know what it is, and so you can go in and fix it. And so I have been, maybe I think the most I ever had it done was maybe on one book, two times. And a lot of times those are getting your cover correct, which is something that I don't know if we're going to be covering that. If I have time, I might throw that in. Cover is important, just like editing is, and just like you need to have, you might need to go and get yourself somebody who can do your cover for you. Might be a good idea. Fiverr is a good outfit to check on that. But you might also have to do it yourself. And so that's the thing about being an independent author. A lot of things you have to do yourself. But you're saving yourself a ton of money, because these services don't come cheap. Now, I mentioned Fiverr. Fiverr, you can get things fairly inexpensive. And if I was to give you a piece of advice about Fiverr, that would be, don't judge it by its price. Some of these people have a very low price, and they do very good quality work. They show your work for you to examine, so you can tell that. So we are now pretty much done with editing. So this is a review of the whole thing. Rough editing, which you don't have to do, but some people do, and it's natural to do it. Just don't get caught up in it too big. Revising, review and edit. And that is something you can do on a chapter basis, or you can do it in the midst of the chapter where you have breaks. Basic editing is where you get down to whereas my wife used to say, I think she used to say, put the pedal to the metal. Put the pedal to the metal. This is where you really get busy. Chapter by chapter, you go through each chapter doing it. End of book, make sure your closing and everything wraps everything up. Entire book. Now you go back and go in chapter 1, the very first page, the very first word, and you start reading all over again, and you read it, you're looking for errors. And you might want to do that more than once, because one time you go through and look for spelling errors, or grammatical errors. Another time you might go through and look for just looking for punctuation. Now you have that tool that your Word document provides, and that will help you a lot in that kind of stuff. But you might want to go through it looking for different things each time. Just remember, although you're not going for perfection, you want it to be as near perfect as you can possibly get it. So you go through this. It's in depth. Don't forget that. It's in depth. And then when you get to proofing, it's even more in depth than it was in the basic. And proofing, you're looking at everything. It's almost like you're repeating the basic, but it's getting it ready. And you're now looking at, when you're looking at proofing, you're looking ahead at what the printer's going to want. So you look at this, then you submit it to the printer, and the printer comes back and either publish it or actually in the first time around, the printer will come back and say, you've got errors here. So, and then you go in, you correct them. Then you hit publish, and then that's when it will either publish it, or it'll come back and say, oh, you got an error here or there. And it's possible that even after all this work, when you get down to the publishing, you will still have to go back and redo things, because the publisher, the printer who is publishing your book for you, may find things that you did not find in this process. They have their own process they follow, and it may be something. It may be usually, like I said, it's the cover itself. Maybe there's something about the picture you used, whatever. Now the one I use tries to get you to fix all that early on, so when you get to this stage, it's not a major problem. So that's it for today. We're going to be looking, I believe we're going to be looking at next one we got coming in. Oh, we're going to be looking at the Avatar, and I believe there was another subject I was going to look at. It's going to be two subjects. So that's coming up in the next lesson. Something I want you to really take notes on and pay attention, because these are keys that are going to affect you now and later when you get to the marketing. So, and remember this, while the course is available now and it is on sale, I advise you, if you're interested in buying this course, wait until the final lesson. And why? Because I am going to give you a deal that I believe you will like. It will save you money, and I think there's some other features in there that you're going to like as well. So if you're looking forward to doing that, I would just say hold on for now and see what I'm going to tell you in session 6. Right now we're done with session 4. We're going to 5, and I will see you there. You have a great day.